Доброго дня, шановні.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. UCMC starts its work, and the topic of our briefing presentation of monitoring report on persecution of activists and human rights defenders, first half of 2021. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear journalists, representatives of human rights defender organization. I'm Yankina, and I had the area of the protection of human rights in ZMINA Human Rights Protection Center, and today we will speak about human rights defenders in Ukraine, and this is the presentation of monitoring report for the first half year of 2021. For the start, I would like to tell you about our participants during this press conference. Anastasia Moskvichova, my colleague, researcher at the Center of Human Rights Center ZMINA, Valery Kharchuk. He represents Anti-Corruption Regional Fund, and he is going to tell us about how he is being intimidated in Lubizhna in Luhansk Oblast. Eugenia Zakrevska, lawyer of family of Katerina Ganzuk, and also lawyer of Roman Radushny. She's going to tell us about how in the first half of 2021, how they deal with this case, and about the results of investigation of the killing of Katerina Ganzuk and also Vitaliy Ustymenko. He represents NGO Avtomaidan, and he is an activist from Odesa. I would like to thank the European Union for this opportunity to hold today's press conference and to highlight the events concerning persecution of activists and human rights defenders in the first half of 2021. Issues we are going to discuss. The kind of activism that became the most dangerous during half year of 2021, the methods used to intimidate activists, what methods are the most popular to intimidate activists in Ukraine. And we are going to speak ultra-right violence and the attacks of far-right activists and how law enforcement officers respond to these attacks. I would like to mention that in 2021, from the start of the year, we record in our report some increase in the number of cases of persecutions, and this shows that this is the consequence of cases that were not investigated properly before. And also we see that illegal actions are committed against activists. The activists that were persecuted during previous periods, and we recorded cases against them concerning Valery, Vitaliy, and they are going to tell us their stories. Also, we would like to note that Kiev and Odesa are the leaders in anti-rating concerning the number of persecutions. Moreover, we continue to record the attempts of pressure from the side of law enforcement bodies on activists, and the attempt of pressure on the activists of Mr. Sternenko case, and also persecutions in Kiev and Zhytomyr. And pressure is made by police on these activists, and also pressure from SBU, who hold interviews to pressure activists who were participants of peaceful gatherings, who didn't commit any crimes, and they were not brought to any responsibility. I would like to give the floor to our international colleague, Antonina Maslow for the welcoming word. She represents Helsinki committee in Netherlands. Antonina, you're given the floor. Thank you very much. I'm going to speak English.
Katerina, and I'm a program officer for the Human Rights Defense Program at the Netherlands Helsinki Committee. Partner of the ZMINA Human Rights Center in the project, under the framework of which the current monitoring report on the persecution of civic activists and human rights defenders has been prepared and is being presented today. With the overall climate for defending human rights becoming increasingly hostile in Ukraine, the peaceful work of the country's HRDs and civil society activists is also facing increasing challenge and danger. As the Netherlands Helsinki Committee, we believe it's crucial to continue monitoring the situation of human rights defenders and civil society activists in Ukraine and continue to stand in solidarity with them. Since the protection of human rights is a joint responsibility of many actors, the international community, including other states and also international media outlets, needs to be reminded of the courage and the struggles of human rights defenders and civil society activists in Ukraine, and of the solidarity the international community owes to them at personal, societal, and high diplomatic levels. We believe it's crucial that other states mainstream the protection and promotion of human rights in bilateral and multilateral diplomatic relations with Ukraine. The protection of human rights should be a baseline feature for all diplomatic and economic contacts. Making use of various fora is needed to effectively convey the message that business as usual is not possible as long as the impunity issue regarding threats and attacks on human rights defenders and civic activists is not addressed. Ukraine is one of the priority countries in the Eastern Partnership, which prescribes democracy, rule of law, and respect for human rights as its core principles, in addition to the principles of sustainable development and market economy. Therefore, we call particularly on the EU and EU member states to address the following topics in their relations with Ukraine. First of all, the ineffectiveness of investigations into violations of the rights of civil society activists as a threat to the development of civil society and democratic transformation in Ukraine. And second, the need to ensure that national investigation bodies not only investigate suspected perpetrators of the attacks against human rights defenders and civic activists, but also against those actors who ordered the attacks, and take steps to prevent future attacks by ensuring the safety of human rights defenders and those activists who face harassment, threats, or other forms of pressure or persecution. I would like to thank our colleagues at ZMINA Human Rights Center for organizing the event, guest speakers for joining, and wish you a fruitful discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Дякую дуже, Антоніна. Я передаю слово своїй колезі Анастасії.
I give the floor to Anastasia Moskvichova, and she's going to tell us in more detail about the regions and in more detail about the cases. And you have reports and materials, and they will be presented on the site. Please, Anastasia, you're given the floor. So Lyudmyla partly voiced our conclusions, and I will try not to repeat. And in the second quarter of this year, we recorded 21 new incidents of persecutions in the controlled territories, 6 in April, 9 in May, and 6 in June. The biggest number of cases was observed in 2 regions, in Kiev, 6, and in Odesa, 5, and all the cases happened in Rubizhne. Also, 1 case was in Kiev, Mykolaiv, Cherkassk, and Lviv, Ternopil, and Kharkiv and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts. As you may see, if you look at our infographics on persecutions, the biggest number of incidents concerning damage of property of activists. In some cases, it was about a series of attacks, and Lyudmyla mentioned that we have entrepreneur from Rubizhne, Valery Kharchuk, and as of now, his car was damaged 4 times, and several cars were split with acid, and one more activist from Rubizhna, she was against closing one of the schools. A window was broken in her office, so we may speak about the negative atmosphere in this town. Also, we see the illustration here, the photo, what happened with the car of Mr. Kharchuk. Also, environment activists also suffered. Sergei Dolik's car was burned. He is against the extraction of levels and cutting of trees. And there were some intimidations against him, and Leonid Kolesnichenko garage also was burnt, and he is against illegal dump and illegal cutting of trees and extraction of sand. This is near Odesa, and because of this arson, not only the house of this garage suffered, but also the car also sustained damage. So families of activists, they also suffer from these persecutions. And second place, this is threats, and we should note the threats for LGBT, intimidations, and one more letter with the intimidations was sent to them. And this campaign is ongoing, and the letters this time, we see the example of this letter on the screen, the screenshot of the letter. It was sent also to local media, and police was informed on this, and police got this message from the journalists, and the LGBT community informs about this. This is called Liga. And the police didn't want to recognize them as victims in the case. About physical attacks. This quarter we record 2 cases like this. One against blogger from Kotsybinska in Kiev Oblast, Yuri Ustinovsky, when he created video about local council meeting, and 2 deputies attacked him and the police. That was called to the site of the crime. They answered our request. They said that they've opened 2 cases, one based on Ustinovsky claim, and second was the claim of the deputies who were identified by him as attackers. And they say that Ustinovsky attacked them. And second case we see on the slide. This is attack on press presentation, and this was attack on LGBT, and this film is called Budmo Gay. And unknown people with Solaris insignia, they broke the window, and they thrown in grenade with gas, and we classified it as physical attack, not as obstruction of the activity of as an organization, because this was about cultural event. That was not the part of activity of one organization. Moreover, during these 3 months, we recorded 2 obstruction of activities because they tried to obstruct physically the work of organizations. 2 incidents also had signs of illegality, 1 illegal detention and 1 case of discreditation. more about discreditation. Maybe this information may be provided by Vitaliy Ustymenko. Also, during this period, we recorded the attempt of SBU to extradite Alexey Balinkov. He is from Belarus, and from the times of Revolution of Dignity, he lives in Kiev, and he participates in different actions of protest against impunity and abuse by law enforcement bodies. And they wanted to extradite him based on SBU decision, and the SBU believes that he threatens public security based on the channel and through because they say that there were some calls for violence on his channel, and Mr. Balinkov filed the complaint, and he was not extorted, and now they do not extradite him. And they try to extradite one more person, Mr. Turkan Dretovic. And he is now trying to get political asylum in Ukraine. Speaking about Balinkov case, it is worth mentioning that when the cases were heard in court, some ultra-right activists came and they expressed aggression against him, and also some unknown people in July tried to obstruct press conference with Belarus activists, and this case was mentioned. The case of Alexey Balinkov was considered. So speaking about the situation in the first 6 months of this year, on the whole, we recorded 53 cases of persecutions of activists, and this is more than we described during the same period of the previous year. And these figures constantly increase, but we see and we believe that this dynamics is for two reasons. First, negative processes increase. This is about ultra-right groups, offline and online. And from another side, and this is maybe good, because activists provide information about pressure on them, and then we try to do something to help them. Speaking about the types of persecutions, I won't voice once again the figures. Once again, we see that destruction of property is on the first place in anti-rating. If you're speaking about the types of activities due to which civic activists suffered, those types of activities that can be clearly identified, because often it is difficult to do, because people, especially in the regions, they work in several areas of activism at the same time. Based on the results of the half year of monitoring this year, the most risky is LGBTQ activism, anti-corruption, and protection of women's rights. This is the new situation, because previously, during 2 years, when this survey was carried out, I mean 2020 and 2019, anti-corruption activists and eco-activists were leading, and this year situation changed. The problem is impunity because of pressure on the LGBT community by far-right radicals, and also police continue to register claims from citizens, and they do not start cases, or they close cases because they cannot identify the persons of attackers. And also, Liga in Mykolaiv, and I've mentioned about it before, there were some attacks on Odesa office, and they tried to break the camera, CCTV camera, and also there was aggression against inside organization in Kiev and Odessa. And during the events concerning rights of women and LGBT rights and feminist actions and educational campaigns, and the representatives of Insight and the representatives of the Odessa office of Liga, they had to open cases and send cases to court. And also there were homophobic attacks are not qualified in accordance with Article 161. And if they start this case, then these cases are suspended. And this happened with the attack on action in Uzhgorod. There was an action on the 8th of March, and the feminists were sprinkled with paint, and one of the participants suffered damage, and she addressed law enforcement officers, and the police started an investigation, and they investigated this case right in two cases. One, according to the article of like bodily harm, and this case was sent to court, and this year it was stopped. They stopped consideration because the time limit expired for consideration of the case. And the second case continues. This is violation of equality case. And on the 31st of July, this case of Ms. Koval may be also stopped. And also we see new cases in the media against LGBT activists and others, and different threats are sent to them, and also some tracking of the activity. And also one of the threats I would like to mention is anonymous Telegram channels of ultra-rights who publish personal data of these people, and in the result of this, they are identified by hatred groups, and they send all these messages to them. And this trend, unfortunately, reinforced in July. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Anastasia. And now I give the floor to Valery Kharchuk, representative of Luhansk Oblast from Rubizhne, who is going to tell us about how arsons of his car were made and also splashing with acids. Please tell us about who do you suspect who ordered these intimidation actions, and how a law enforcement system responds to these cases, whether they cooperate with you, and about the case, how it is going on now.
Yeah, this happens partially because we understand that law enforcement agencies, they are prosecutors, they are policemen, and our civil organization works with Anti-Monopoly Committee and Severodonetsk Prosecution Office, and this started as we started financial cases to address financial crimes. And because the tenders were stopped, and when we were fighting, we try to stop corrupt tenders, and that is why we were attacked. Of course, self-governments, local self-governments are those who ordered the attacks on us, but the police is searching for the perpetrators and organizers. For a long time, law enforcement agencies did not act properly. That is why I think that Rubizhansk Town's Council, they are the perpetrators, and there were grounds to initiate the case, criminal case. And now we think why this gang started these terrorist acts of terrorism, such as arson, such as acid pouring on my car. The session at the town's council in Rubizhansk finished that for several years. When we enter the sessions of this Rubizhansk council, when we tried to shoot videos of the sessions, or when we come together with other activists who, for example, protest against closing of some school in order to or where we address some financial crimes. Of course, when they try to close some enterprises, state-owned enterprises, the trade unions and the activists, they want to protest against this. And our organization helped these people to go to the courts and appeal against closure or against shutdown of the enterprises. And we were very efficient. And the corrupt tenders were cancelled. We are talking about millions of hryvnias, and fines amounted to 100 and 125,000 hryvnias. So this will discourage people from taking such illegal actions, such corrupt tenders. That is why we are intimidated, because our civic activities are very efficient. This is the history, how it happens. Before, in previous years, the mayor of the town attacked us. Yes, an activist can provoke some aggression when the activists say some insulting words against the mayor, but this was an attack, physical attack, when the mayor attacked an activist, and it was unmotivated. So I think that this person shows that he is a kind of criminal authority, that he creates his image as a so tough ruler of the town. In our town, dozens of apartments are distributed among judges and prosecutors free of charge from the state. And his counsel, legal counsel, she is the chief of investigation. So he has the pressure, the mechanisms. He has other persons in power, and we see that he is forming an illegal organization around him and try to involve as many as possible top officials into his criminal organization. My cars were arsoned, and they were dosed with acid, but I didn't see any criminal cases. In criminal case, I don't see any video records. However, there are video records of this attacks on my property. As a result, when criminal investigations take place, the town's council has the mechanism to block the investigations. In the criminal case, there are telephones, numbers of telephones who were in vicinity, and my lawyer helps to accelerate the investigation, but the local heads of law enforcement authority, they try to sabotage this case, so video records have not been seized, so the situation is not good as of today, but we continue our efforts. All these micro-terrorism acts, yeah, they are strong against us, they affect us, but they are aimed at intimidating all the people in Rubezhny town. For example, we are talking about the schools. There was one school which was 80% filled, but it was closed, and this is illegal. And this building will be transferred to law enforcement agency, to hold the law enforcement agency. The law says that only when there are pupils lacking, then schools can be closed, and this school was closed illegally. So in my case, the response of law enforcement agency was not bad because they didn't oppose and they did not intimidate me, but any criminal starts his criminal activities from school when he first organized a gang, but before the local enforcement agency failed to act. That's why we had problem, and this person had become a real criminal authority. Now I am giving the floor to the lawyer of Katerina Ganzuk. Katerina Ganzuk was an activist, and she was dosed with sulfuric acid in 2018, in July 2018, and after several months she died in November, and this was an attempted premeditated murder according to the qualification of the police. So could you tell us please about this case, how the investigation is going? As of today, the case about one of the persons who ordered this attack is being investigated, and more or less at this stage the persons can be brought to liability normally, and the next sitting is going to be very interesting. I would like to invite all media persons present here to our sitting, where an accomplice, Alexey Levin, he said that he would give his testimonies at the next sitting. So I think we will be able to question Levin on August 4th at 2:00 p.m. in Dniprovsk Court in Kiev. Dniprovsk District Court, you're welcome. Maybe I shall outline how this part of investigation was brought to this situation. First of all, everyone remembers that from the very beginning, the investigation didn't investigate anything, just qualified this case as hooliganism. And after the first attempts to transfer this case from local police to Kiev by SBU, because they were attributes of terroristic act, and the person was named as a perpetrator who was not a real perpetrator. And the evidence in August 2018, Levin, this person who we are talking about today, he was warned by local policemen and he fled. So the case for 3 months was pending in an unsatisfactory case, in unsatisfactory status. But at this stage today, in 2018, in the formulation of suspicion, or there were no registration of this case as a premeditated murder, but under the pressure it was requalified into a premeditated murder. When Katya died, this was a direct connection which was proved by experts that this dosing with sulfuric acid resulted in the death of the girl. There were tools of this crime, but there were some tools which were not proved as a tool of murder. Acid, but acid, sulfuric acid, this is like a gun or like a knife. When you can help a person wounded by a bullet, but you cannot help the girl after she was burned with sulfuric acid. Before this attack, there was a high-profile case in the UK where the person died after only 10% of burnt after dosing with sulfuric acid, and it was qualified in the UK as a premeditated murder. Now, in Ukraine, the accusations against Manger, the head of the Kherson regional council, who was one of the heads of the region those days. And if we had failed to transfer the case to Kiev and to prevent local law enforcement authorities from interfering with this case, then we wouldn't have possibility to bring to responsibility of this former head of Kherson Regional Council, Mr. Manger, and also his accomplice, Mr. Levin. When we feel that someone is an organizer, but we need proofs, we need evidence to bring them in court, and they cannot be the same usual proofs like tool of crime, which we use to prove that the person was a perpetrator of some crime. We need a proactive investigation. We need special operations so that we can trace these accomplices, so that they do some actions which will uncover them. Or they should be witnesses, testimonies of those who took part in this crime, of the figures in the case. And we have succeeded. We got first the perpetrators' testimonies in order to inform suspicion to Mr. Manger. The first suspicion was in 2019, in February 2019, but there were more testimonies needed. It happened in November 2020 in Kiev court. And we hope that within 1 year, this branch of this case will finish with a verdict, and we hope that these persons will be brought to responsibility. Even at the moment when the public, white public, and the relatives, and Katya, she took part for 3 months in this investigation. She provided much information, very much information when she was alive. She remembered many, many things, and when we forced to investigate this case, or trying to falsify the case as if this is some revenge of her ex-lover, then the hype started from authorities. And this resulted in negative effects such as disclosure of information of the investigation when it was not allowed by the law. And the worst thing was that all these targets, they were short term. The general prosecutor, who was then the general prosecutor, he was focused only on short-term targets, and what will be in court, this was not of his interest. So such hype moments, they convert into the process problems which we face now, something we can overcome. In court, we will not be able to transform qualification. The prosecutor's office qualified this case as not as a premeditated murder, but only as a severe damage to health, which resulted in the death of a person. In 2019, one of prosecutors said that if they wanted to kill the girl, then they would have used another tool. I watched the videos about this acid case in the UK. In the UK, acid is more often used. This is not a bullet. It does not have such traces. It is easier to get, and the results for the person, the damage to the person is stronger. So we are now searching for persons who can be figures in the case, and we try to get testimonies with the lie detection devices. We question these witnesses, but we need proactive investigative actions, and they are not taken. They have stopped when the new prosecutor came. When the new general prosecutor came, then proactive activities of prosecution stopped. So we need some time. Every prosecutor only used this case for some period for his own PR, and later the activities investigation deteriorate, and the situation with the investigation deteriorates as well. And only relatives and the lawyer remain those who are interested in the case. I'm giving the floor to Vitaliy, an activist from Odesa. Vitaliy Ustymenko is the head of Avtomaidan. There was campaign of discreditation against Vitaliy. Okay, I shall tell you in brief. This 6 months, several smear campaigns of black PR against me were initiated. We should understand why in this individual case this happens, and this concerns also the destruction of property, damage to my property. We need to go to law enforcement agencies so that they respond when we are attacked or our property is damaged. But in Ukraine, repeated attacks and even more attacks can happen when impunity continues in Ukraine. If I do not respond to discreditation attacks, then these attacks would become more intensive. An attempt of administrative influence, an administrative protocol was issued to me. The last time this was in 2013, but now this year I was issued again the administrative protocol for my civic activities. Mr. Valery from Rubizhne has described the situation in very good terms, and I see that there are very many similar features in Odessa and in Drubizhne when I heard his story. So financial group use law enforcement agencies and courts and impunity remains in place. These persons are not brought to responsibility. They are organized criminals in Odessa. They want to investigate cases on local level because everything is identical to what happens in Drubizhne. So in this situation, we have learned in Odessa not to give any ground for response. We do not do physical actions which can give them any pretext for initiated cases against. Even we do not destroy any fences around the places of illegal construction, because I was detained at one protest rally in 2018, but tomorrow I will have the next court sitting about this administrative protocol, saying allegedly that I used forbidden words to insult the developer of illegal construction site. We see that these developers, they destroy historical buildings and they are not issued administrative protocols of administrative offense. And I have been issued a protocol of administrative offense as allegedly I insulted this developer with words. So now I have attempted discreditation and other pressure. I experience other types of pressure. So I would like to tell other activists, please respond to any discreditation cases and any attacks in order not to give rise to intensification of these trends. This will help you and us in our activities, in our civic activities. We have this situation in regions because in the regions, we lack law enforcement agencies. The perpetrators, of course, we are talking about financial industrial groups in towns, in regional towns. They like it very much that there are no law enforcement agencies which are active. This system, law enforcement system, is missing in Ukraine. That is why today we are talking here and discussing this topic. There were two premeditated attacks, Kuzma Kuzakon and my case in 2018. There was a situation where law enforcement officers were obviously linked to these attacks, and we tried to transfer these cases to Kiev. But the general prosecutor, Ms. Benedictova, returned these cases to the regional level, to the local level. And then all perpetrators, organizers, and the persons who ordered these attacks, they are not brought to responsibility, and even the perpetrators have been already released in my case and in Kuzma case. And this gives origin to impunity, and this will result in deterioration of the situation and increase of violence cases. Thank you, Vitaliy. Thank you to all the speakers. So we call on the National Police of Ukraine and General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine to thoroughly investigate the cases which we mentioned in our last report and in our previous reports, because this is obvious. We see these trends that no investigation or low standard investigation, this result in new attacks, in new arsons, in new damages of cars. That is why we call on you to investigate the cases at high standard, because the price of this is safety of all residents of Ukraine. Do you have any questions? We have only 2 minutes. Correspondent ICTV channel, I would like to ask Lyudmyla Zakrevska a very simple question. On August 4th, there will be court sitting in Dniprovsk District Court. You are a professional. Tell us, please. There is court precedence, for example, in UK, as you said, that there are such investigations and there were verdicts in the UK, and we joined, there is a document we signed and we accessed the document that we shall follow world's best practices. Can you refer to this in your case of dosing with sulfuric acid of Katya Ganzuk to get a fair verdict? Our criminal legislation also allows this, but the problem is in practice. The prosecutor, I think, they treat sulfuric acid as only as a non-serious tool. They think that acid is not so bad weapon like gun, so we the victims cannot overrun the prosecutor. When we demand, the victim can act only within the framework of the accusations pronounced by the prosecutor, even if we think that the prosecutor was wrong. The court cannot follow our standing. It can follow only the prosecutor's position. Thank you very much, and the report will be available